I want to break down this interview that Chris Cuomo conducted with Mark McCloskey, the gentleman who drew his gun on the trespassers and group that had destroyed private property by breaking down a gate to private residential roads. I want to demonstrate for you the narrative that Chris Cuomo has here. And of course, many people interview someone with a narrative, but in this case, it is the continued narrative that CNN is trying to portray. And I'm going to get to that and discuss that going forward. So stay tuned for that.
We can talk about the legal rights and the facts. I want to talk about not having a right, but whether or not something is right first, which is, how do you feel about becoming the face of political resistance to the Black Lives Matter movement?
Oh, wow. What a leadoff question. The question is framed as a presupposition, at least in the viewers' minds, that he is in fact already resistant to the movement. And not only that, it's a mind read in and of itself. Of course, it actually does make him the face of the political resistance to BLM, to the low IQ CNN watcher who has not yet managed to realize that the network itself has moved from news to propaganda.
First of all, that's a completely ridiculous statement. I'm not the face of anything opposing the Black Lives Matter movement. I was a person scared for my life who was protecting my wife, my home, my hearth, my livelihood. I was a victim of a mob that came through the gate. I didn't care what color they were. I didn't care what their motivation was. I was frightened. I was assaulted. And I was in imminent fear that they would run me over, kill me, burn my house. And you have to have this in the context of St. Louis, where on June the 2nd of this year, I watched the city burn. I watched the 7-Eleven get smashed in, looted, and burned for 40 minutes on live television with nobody showing up to do anything. And I realized at that time we're on our own. When bad things happen, they unpredictably turn really bad, real fast. That same night, retired St. Louis Police Captain David Doran was murdered. These things get very bad very quickly, and when those people came through the gate, when it was a mob, I didn't take the time to see their birth certificates or anything else. I was defending my house, my life, my wife, and what I've spent 32 years building there.
I understand what you say your rationale was. To be clear, did anything happen to you or your property?
Mr. McCloskey, by trade, you might guess, is in fact a lawyer. His answer is fantastic. It hits it out of the park. He immediately counters Cuomo's assertion that he is in fact the face of the resistance against the noble cause, as the Cuomo is certainly trying to get his users to infer, even if he doesn't say it explicitly. He explains what took place from his standpoint rather than engage Cuomo's attempt to score political points. Now Cuomo pretty much dismisses his account and shifts the focus to a question that he and all the viewers already know the answer to. He makes it look as though the McCloskeys overreacted drastically, that they weren't under any threat. Here you go.
Did anything happen? Yeah, my life has been ruined.
No, we'll get to that, Mr. McCloskey. I don't mean to cut you off.
Yes, Chris, you absolutely did mean to cut them off because you want your narrative that he overreacted to be percolating through your viewers' minds.
But I'm saying that night, did anything happen to you, your family, or your property?
Yeah, it's called social intimidation. It's called terrorism. Chris, what's the definition of terrorism? To use violence and intimidation to frighten the public. That's what was happening that night. It's what happened to me, and that's the damage I suffered.
You were the one pointing a loaded weapon at a group of people who were walking past looking for the mayor's house as a point of protest.
No, I'm doing it.
Once again, Chris Cuomo here is reframing this as though these were absolutely innocent protesters, like they were third graders on a field trip marching behind their favorite teacher in a line. Mr. McCloskey had nothing to fear from them, according to Cuomo, as if they hadn't already busted down the door to a private residential neighborhood and were already trespassing, in addition to everything that he's already seen on TV.
Chris, that's an entirely false concept. No single media outlet has ever mentioned the complete falsity of that statement. The mayor's house cannot be reached through my neighborhood. Lyda Crewson lives up on a road called Lake and Washington. That's 3 blocks north and a half a mile west of my house.
So where do you think they were going?
They were going through a private neighborhood for the intention of going through a private neighborhood, in my humble opinion. In retrospect, at the time I didn't have any time to think about this. However, the leader of the entity called Expect Us that organized this, whatever it was, announced ahead of time that he does not want to have a peaceful protest. He wants to have it be as disruptive as possible. And when interviewed subsequently, he said, I know it was illegal, I know it was a private neighborhood, but when you're doing protests of this nature, it's necessary to break the law to get your ends met. And that's what was happening. Of course, I didn't know any of that at the time. All I knew was that hundreds of people screaming, shouting, angry, broke through the private gate. Everything inside that gate is private property.
Right.
Any pretense of protest as opposed to terrorism ended when they broke through that gate.
Terrorism is a strong word, Counselor, don't you think? I mean, let's stipulate for the point of this conversation, Chris, that they went through the private. Look, I let you make your points. Let the rejoinders happen, and then you can go.
Sure, sure.
You got counsel with you. You're safe, I promise.
Now, to be fair for a moment to Chris Cuomo, I think it is a fair question to ask whether or not this meets the definition of terrorism, whether it's just being hyperbolic or not. And also, McCloskey did earlier in the conversation, in the interview, use the word assaulted. So I can appreciate Cuomo at least trying to clarify this. But make no mistake about it, he is still acting as a lawyer on behalf of the leftist movement during this entire interview.
The idea that they broke the law, I give it to you. They went through a private gate. I'm sure you have video of it or somebody can prove that. I stipulate they went through the gate. But they're yelling, they're angry. They did not go up your steps. They didn't go to your house. They didn't touch you. They didn't try to enter your home. They didn't try to do anything to your kids. But you say you were assaulted. You're using the civil definition of that, which is that you had the apprehension that something bad was going to happen to you. But nothing did. But to call terrorism, when the people are there protesting how the community is treated by the police, is a little bit of reverse psychology at a minimum, is it not?
No. You're absolutely wrong. The reason why they did not get up my steps was that my wife and I were there with weapons to keep them off our steps.
How do you know?
Because they were coming at us until I displayed the weapon, and that stopped them. I came out.
So do you? Wait, I'm sure a house like that. I'm sure a house like that has cameras. Do you have video of them coming up the steps and being in your house?
I'm not going to discuss the level of my private security on national television.
Oh,
that's not a topic.
But do you have proof of them actually approaching your house?
Again, what is this guy supposed to do? They've already demonstrated a willingness to break the law. Your assertion that these protesters are entirely peaceful and that they have nothing to fear has serious holes in the argument, Chris. For purposes of time, I'm going to skip over the next part where Mr. McCloskey's lawyer goes at it with Chris, as it furthered the conversation very little.
Mr. McCloskey, this is what I'm saying. The president retweeted this thing for a reason. Why do you think he retweeted it?
You know, I don't have any idea why the president retweeted it. I've not seen it, not seen the retweet. I think you ought to ask the president. And if he, you know, I was reluctant to come on your.
He deleted it.
I was reluctant to come on your show for a similar reason. But let me say this: you said it was protesting police brutality. That's absolutely inaccurate. The announced purpose for this event was to ask the mayor, Lyda Crewson, whose own husband was murdered in her driveway in that same house years ago, in front of her and her kids. Okay, that's how undangerous these things are.
Bam! Once again, Chris Cuomo tries to frame this under a false narrative that this is what the protesters are doing. This is not about protesting police brutality anymore. This is about silencing anybody who dare stand up against them. This is what Cuomo is trying to preach to the public.
The alleged purpose of this event was to ask her to resign for doxing protesters.
Right.
But guess what? Have I been doxed? Have those very people that were walking down my street screaming death threats at me and threatening to burn my house and kill my dog and what rooms in my house they were going to live in after they killed me? Do you think them then distributing my information all over the Western Hemisphere is different than what they're asking the mayor to resign for doing. This hypocrisy is just obvious nonsense.
Look,
They have,
again, Mr. McCloskey, I don't like that you have been weaponized for political means. I'm not saying that you weren't within your rights to do what you were doing. That will be judged by the system.
Yes, you actually are, Chris. You're saying that he was not morally correct to stand up for himself. Again, stand up to the leftist mob, demonstrate any resistance, and suddenly you're evil.
That's not why I'm having you on the show, as I said at the top. And you said I didn't want to come on the show. Listen, I think I'm fair. I'm not going to use you as a pawn to advance my own agenda like the show you just went on.
Who Chris is referencing here is Tucker Carlson. And again, Cuomo is a complete liar. His agenda, which I promised you I would tell you at the top of the show, is, of course, Orange Man bad. And we're going to get into that into a little bit more depth at the end of this video.
Which is where somebody wants people to see Black Lives Matter as inimical to the American cause. I don't make those kinds of judgments for people.
And once again, Cuomo is absolutely full of it. He is absolutely casting Black Lives Matter and this movement in the light of an angelic halo. Don't see it any different. See the angels smiling above from heaven upon them.
But the guy who just walked past your house on the looping piece of video had hands up, don't shoot on this. The stated purpose of this demonstration, and that's all we can go on, is that they didn't like that the mayor outed, or as you say, doxed people who were for defunding the police. And now you can like that or not like that, but you have been used and politically weaponized as a face of white resistance to that movement. And that's why I asked you that. Not because that's how you see yourself, but that's how you're being seen. And I wanted to give you a chance with counsel to respond to that. I don't see, I don't see how you could see that as an unfair question.
I'm eliminating the following part where Cuomo goes at it with McCloskey's lawyer because, again, it's not very compelling.
Yeah, I read that you say it was white guys that initially spooked you about what you needed to do. Mr. McCloskey, go ahead. Last word to you.
Now, interestingly enough, when I tried to locate the full interview on YouTube, I went to CNN's page, and this part of the interview was deleted from their video. It just cut out. The reason it cuts out is because Cuomo looks really awful here.
all right. Guy stands in front of me, pulls out 2 loaded pistol magazines, snaps them together in front of my face, and says, "You're next." Okay? If you were there, Chris, I think you'd feel like you had a right to defend yourself as well.
Absolutely. Somebody takes out magazines or ammunition and clicks it and makes a direct threat to me, I would feel threatened 100%.
And that's what happened to me.
And look, I know that you're going through a process with this. I welcome you having counsel. If you were within your rights to do what you were doing, it should be adjudged as such. I wanted to talk to you about the broader implication because it's just a horrible picture of what's going on in America right now. So to me, it's not about what's right and what's wrong just in a court of law. It's about what we want right and wrong about how we treat each other. And that's why the president retweeted this tweet. Mr. Watkins, you know it, and Mr. McCloskey, you know it. He retweeted it because he liked the image of white resistance to this movement. And I'm not saying that was fair to you, but we know that's why he did it because that's why he deleted it.
Chris is trying to make the case once again that Donald Trump is a racist, that people don't have the right to stand up for themselves. And if they do, well, then they're racist as well. That's the whole point of the interview, Orange Man bad. Watch this fantastic answer from Mr. McCloskey.
I wanted you to speak for yourself.
I'm glad you're a mind reader because no one else thinks you are.
Oh, in fact, he didn't delete it. Good. Makes my point even more. You didn't say that. It was said to me for me. I'm thinking about something else where someone was screaming white power in a video that the president retweeted. He deleted that one. He didn't delete the one of you.
Of course, the whole purpose of this narrative that Chris Cuomo is doing, the whole objective of this interview is to claim that Donald Trump is a racist, that is Orange Man evil, and he is using McCloskey as his pawn in doing so. He is framing McCloskey as the antichrist to Black Lives Matter, which unfortunately is going to be seen by millions of people around the United States if CNN does in fact still have that many viewers. It is a horrific thing, and I just want to show you for the record so you guys can see how racism is such a sought-after commodity. It's like gold for the leftists. I've unearthed gold. I've struck ye gold. Racism at the core. When it comes up and you put it under the light, it turns out to be fool's gold. And we're going to see that happen here. Once again, this narrative of this racist Oklahoman is a false one, but it's just meant to temporarily feed the media hysteria surrounding George Floyd, surrounding racism that supposedly exists en masse in the United States. Watch the real clip. Watch the full clip.
Where's your white hood? Where's your white hood? Racist! Yeah, you got it! White power! Yes, there you go, white power. You hear that?
It was clearly an attempt to be a sarcastic rejoinder to the people that were screaming that they were racist, where's your white hood, etc., just for being Trump supporters. This is a visible divide and a chasm that exists in our country, that anybody on the right is automatically castigated as evil. That was the whole point of this CNN interview of this man. If you're not on the side of the leftists, then you are a racist. Orange man bad. This is CNN's entire narrative. It's completely dishonest. It's propagandistic. It furthers the divide in our country. It is also a stark warning that if you oppose leftism in any way, that we will shine the spotlight on you and you will become the face, the antichrist, the resistance to the noble causes that these leftists are trying to enact. It is a warning. So make sure to kowtow to the leftists. This is CNN's reason for being, to convince us of this. If you guys like this material, please by all means like it on YouTube and share it with a friend. If you're a first-time watcher, make sure to subscribe. Peace out. Blessings to everybody.